So, Professor, in the last segment, you basically walked us through the demise of the Obama administration negotiated Iranian nuclear deal and a vision of what could have come in the wake of that deal, were it not for the fact Donald Trump's hostility towards the deal. I don't know if his hostility was ideological, or he certainly had people in the Republican Party who were very excited at the idea that he would crash the deal. I think it also, he is determined, it appears, to destroy anything that is a function of Barack Obama's legacy in any way. And so he sacked the deal, and as you told us, went around the world to basically pressure our allies to not do business with Iran, although there was really no legal framework for any of this. It was more or less, thuggery. Recently, there have been overtures from Iran via France in particular to revive the deal. Tell us about those, but then let's just talk about this, the latest incident where there is an attempt, and this is not the first in the past couple of months, to argue that Iran has essentially launched a war on Saudi Arabia, a direct one.
Sure. Well, yes, the European Union and particularly France and Germany wanted to try to keep the nuclear deal alive, partly because they liked it and it was working. Iran was known to be in compliance, according to the UN inspectors. And they also still had lots of CEOs who fondly dreamed of getting into the Iranian market and bumping up the European economy. So this was very inconvenient for them that Trump acted in this way. And so they've been trying to find a way around him. They have set up something called Instex, which would allow European firms to trade with Iran, not in dollars, because the U.S. claims that any dollar trade is under the authority of the Treasury Department, and sidestepping the major bank exchanges like SWIFT, which the U.S. is influential in. So Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, at the recent G7 meeting, sort of took the surprise initiative of inviting the Iranian foreign minister, Mohammad Javad Zarif, who negotiated the deal originally, and have consultations with him in hopes, I think, of getting a meeting between him and the Americans to start this process of renegotiating some kind of agreement. And Macron also suggested that maybe he could sweeten the whole thing with a $15 billion credit line to Iran to tide them over while negotiations are kickstarted. And, lo and behold, it seems as though Trump didn't hate this. My analysis of him is that he felt as though his predecessors were patsies and just gave away the show, and that he can make a better deal than they did on China and Iran and everywhere. The way you do that is to bring the pain to the previous negotiating partners, announce that there's a new kid in town, and make it clear that the only way to remove the pain is to come to him and renegotiate. Right. And he's done that with China. He's done that to some extent, even with some of our European allies, and he's done it with Iran and North Korea. So, in some instances, I think the North Koreans are very clever, and they figured out that there's no substance here. It's all showmanship. So they said, "Sure, we'll meet with you. We'd love that." The Iranians, feel mistreated by the West, and their government was overthrown in 1952, and they had a long period of dictatorship imposed on them, essentially by the CIA. And then they had a 79 revolution, which was a nativist revolution that put forward Iranian Shiite values against global capitalism. And so they're not the kind of people, ideologically speaking, to play the kind of game that I think the North Koreans have started to play, even though the origins of the two revolutions might be somewhat similar. And so the Iranians haven't come back to Trump, and this opening that Zarif tried to make and Macron seems to have been closed down by Iran's leader, clerical leader Ali Khamenei, who said that, sure, we'll talk to the Americans first. They should rejoin the 2015 agreement, and then we'll talk with them all they like.
Okay, we have about 3 minutes left. Let's just talk about the specifics of this latest attack on the Saudi interests. The argument from the administration has ranged from this was secretly launched by Iran to this could only have been done with Iranian weaponry by the Houthi. This is the one party in the Yemen civil war, which, you know, Saudi Arabia is actively fighting with our support. And the other version was, there's general support for the Houthis. So if they did do it, it's basically like Iran doing it. Are any of these claims credible? And even if they were credible, to what extent is it necessary for us to get involved in a war on behalf of Saudi Arabia? We have no agreement, no mutual defense agreement with them. Why would we do this?
Right. Well, I think it's plausible that there's some kind of Iranian fingerprint on all this, whether it's an Iranian proxy or more direct. President Rouhani of Iran has actually said that if Iran's not allowed to export its petroleum from the Gulf, then nobody will be allowed to. So, in a way, I think a lot of Iranians feel they've got nothing left to lose. If they're not going to be allowed to sell their oil, not going to be allowed to trade, they're going to be reduced to a fourth world country, then they intend to bring the pain to the people who are behind all this, which is partly the Saudis, have been big cheerleaders for the American economic war on Iran, and an economic war always holds the potential for turning it into a violent war. My reading of Trump is that he won't want to commit to a conventional sort of warfare against Iran in response, even if Iran is plausibly credited with the attack. He might pull what he did in Syria or Afghanistan. There have been two big instances in Trump's presidency where he just bombed the enemy once.
Right.
And there was a lot of hoopla about it. He said he dropped the mother of all bombs on Afghanistan, which is kind of an echo of Saddam Hussein's dictator Arabic. And then we never heard anything more about it, right? So I think the most that will happen is that, at least initially. But it's dangerous even to do that because the U.S. has something on the order of 5,000 troops still in Iraq, which is Shiite territory, and most of the Iraqi Shiites are pro-Iran. So at that point where the United States is bombing Iran, the U.S. troop security is in the hands of the Shiites of Iraq, and that's a bad scene if it goes in this direction.
And presumably,
14,000.
Right. I mean, presumably the Pentagon is telling Donald Trump this. Well, Professor Juan Cole, I'm sorry we're out of time, but I appreciate your catching us up on this dynamic. And I guess this is something that we will see in the coming days and weeks if something goes further. But I appreciate your time.